Hello and welcome to the Community Showcase, which is a new video format where one of you, the subscribers, will be able to show and talk us through your productivity setup, as well as presenting some challenges you have with it, so that at the end of the video, you'll get some feedback from me personally, but also an invitation to you, the viewer, to respond to this video through a comment and leave your suggestions, so that in the end, every one of us will leave this video feeling either inspired or more knowledgeable. We perhaps finally see someone we can truly identify with, because so far my videos have mostly been more generic. How to use tool ABC for a specific productivity method, for example. But now you're getting some first-hand accounts of how real people are running their productivity setups day to day. The video will basically consist of two parts. The first part being a spotlight on one of you, showing and walking us through your setup. And the second part will contain a summary of that walkthrough, as well as my advice and a call to action to also give your input. If you want to participate in one of these videos in the future, I'll leave a link in the description with a form that you can fill out to submit your productivity setup details and feedback you would like to receive on it. I hope you enjoy.
I've been using Todoist for maybe 5 or 6 years. I've been using it for basically everything. I was even taking notes when Todoist was not even considered taking notes. Well, TickTick does this very good right now, but I've moved away also from TickTick for taking notes. So we're all aiming probably to find a system that works for us, but it's still a hassle. There is still a lot of friction that you need to go from one tool to the other, and how do you do this with less friction, and why that, why this? And there's all these YouTube videos like yours and others. Should we try this new tool? Should we go with that tool? And there's just a rabbit hole, and I'm
It
trying
is.
to get away from it.
Oh yeah, 100%. You're trying to find a tool that you can trust that serves the needs that you have specifically,
Mhm.
and stop feeling like there's something missing that is pretty crucial, which leads you to continuously move around from tool to tool, correct?
Yes, I think if I would label myself, I would be the architect.
In terms of your personality.
Yeah, in terms of
Interesting. I
my
have the same one.
second brain personality. Yeah.
Right. I
I
see.
need to structure everything. I need to be able to find something very easy. I need to filter. I need to label. I need to categorize, to have different views for the same thing. But that's not always
Mhm.
the easiest way. It's not always the fastest. Hard on you when you just want to do things and you start your day and you want to implement something that you prepared yesterday, but it's just overwhelming sometimes.
Would you say that this overwhelm takes place when you're trying to clarify whatever inputs you've saved in your inbox, so to speak? And like you've just expressed, you're trying to organize it as best as you can. You're trying to apply as much detail to it as you can. But since every single item, perhaps in your mind, requires so much detail in order for it to function across these different views, you struggle with having enough time and energy for it in the first place. I know that's something I used to struggle with. Is that what I'm hearing here, or would you say it's a different kind of issue?
It used to be exactly how you've
Mhm.
described. But then lately I've been moving away from it because for example, I used to have this extremely complicated and intricate Notion setup, dashboards over dashboards and views over views and whatnot. I was like, okay, so today I need to schedule this task for the next week. How could I possibly do this so easy? And I like TickTick's version of it. Like you can open the calendar view, you have the calendar in the left, and you have the unscheduled tasks in the right. That's brilliant for me. I can just drag and drop it. Can I do this in Notion? Well, natively not, because in Notion you cannot do pretty much anything natively. You have to build your own system. And I've done that. But Notion is just so slow. I'm trying to move
Right.
away from it. So when I open Notion, I just want to see my daily tasks, what I need to do today, what I need to do tomorrow, and that's it. And then if I need to go and see other stuff, other views, I just search. Shortcuts all the way.
Right, right. TickTick, for example, has these pinned filters you can
Oh yeah.
use, right?
Oh
That
yeah.
is an example of a shortcut that I also rely heavily on in my own system, where I have these context lists based on next action
Mm.
plus context equals this filter, and I can pin it to the top without having to even think about it, basically, right? So,
Yeah.
from what I'm hearing, that is something you're really looking for. And what kind of shortcuts would those be? Could you give an example of a shortcut you would love to have?
Well, that's the thing. You mentioned this customized lists in TickTick, and that's something I used to actually do for about a year and a half when I would actually run all my productivity setup in TickTick. Everything from work to personal to whatever. But I've noticed that I need more context for my tasks, so that's why I moved away from TickTick for work. That's why I'm now in Notion.
I see.
So I would go back to TickTick, but I'm not sure I could actually handle all the levels of information and context I need for all my tasks.
I can imagine. You've also mentioned somewhere you also prefer having it separated, correct? The work lists and your personal lists, because it gives you a better separation, especially for yourself. You're a web designer. So just like me, most of your work takes place behind the same screen all day, pretty much. And it's more difficult to feel accomplished at the end of the day if you still have an open list of work tasks staring you in the face whilst they aren't relevant right now, so to speak. It's more difficult to basically like close the door behind you if you're all running it in the same tool, which I thought was very interesting. I thought it made a lot of sense. Especially it was interesting because personally I don't have that feeling as strongly. For me, it's easy to have it parked inside of a folder dedicated to work projects and just not look at them. But again, that is me, right? You are different. And like you also said, you have different layers of complexity when it comes to your work tasks, which had an extra reason to move you into a custom Notion build. Is there anything else you would like to share in terms of an introduction to your setup before we dive into it in a bit more detail?
So basically, I have this headquarters 3.0. On this page, I only have tasks. So what you'll see is only tasks. I have a capture section where I basically just dump new tasks, and I'll explain how this works. Then I have action, what I need to do today, tomorrow, in the next 7 days, and in foreseeable future. And that's it. That's all I need in this first view. I come in, I check my daily tasks, and if I need to prioritize, I will prioritize beforehand, and then I will just jump on the first task. So basically, I did this today already, and I already did this today. So now I'm on the productivity setup walkthrough with Lucas. So that's what I need to do today, and that's all I'm going to focus on. I'm not going to open anything else because that's just overwhelming. But then I have a menu here, a hidden menu, and why this exists here is just for the mobile use of Notion. Notion is terrible on mobile phones. We all know that. But we need access to this, and there's not always you're going to find yourself behind the laptop to capture tasks and to see what's ahead of you and so on. So you need to be able to see this in a more friendly way on mobile. And I've learned this, I think from either Ali Abdal or Thomas Frank. You just create a toggle, hide everything there, be it, I don't know, heading, table of content, or direct link to these pages. And that's what I did here. What's here? Okay, you have tasks, but who are these tasks for, and how this relates to anything? So what are the databases, basically, because that's what Notion is. It's just a complex database. So I have these databases here. I have projects. I'm a web designer, web developer. I get a new client. So they come to me and we talk about a project. So next thing, we have a project that this client wants me to work on. And then this project will have tasks. Then the layers of information and context that I need for those tasks. So basically, the client's database is just a simple database that just shows, okay, these are the clients that I'm working on. These are my live projects, and I can see they're in progress, and I can change, I complete it, and so on. For each project, I have this view, and then I have basically fast access to input new tasks. I can give it a name and move on.
Once you add a task there, will that show up in the tasks dashboard that we looked at in the beginning?
Yes, with one condition, that task has a date. If it doesn't have a date, it doesn't have to clutter me right now.
I see. Okay. The date, does it represent a deadline, or does it represent a start date, or perhaps both?
That's a good question. If you see here, I have a due date and a deadline. For me, due date is more important than deadline, because deadline is very tricky. I need to be finished with this project by the end of the month. But am I going to see it in my timeline now or by the end of the month? So I need to see it now, what I need to work on right now. If I have 2 weeks for it, I need to start working on it right now.
Yeah, you don't want to risk procrastinating, even if it's not your intention to procrastinate. But if you don't see it in your views, you don't want to see it on the last possible day, of course.
You're done. You're done. Yeah. And then it's a task that normally takes 2 or 3 days, 4 days. It's creativity, it's research, and so on. You're done.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
understood.
and you don't need that, right? So
100%.
that's the to-do list here, and I have this other view that says this week by day. By day.
Like
So
a
basically it's
calendar.
like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. So I can just like move them around, you know. So for example, yesterday, Monday, I don't have anything left from yesterday. I'm working on this today. I will be clicking this done. That's gone for Tuesday. So I see the visual representation that it's taking the pressure off me at the end of the day. So I've done this, I can move on and so on. Maybe it's redundant to have this tool, but I don't
think as long as it helps you, or
Yep.
as long as it gives you value, it's not redundant. And as long as it doesn't cost you a lot of extra effort to produce this view, which clearly it doesn't,
Yeah.
since it's the same data, just
Yeah.
viewed in a different way, I don't see any issues with it. I would think it's an issue if you had to manually copy over things in order to show up on the view, but that's not the case here. So
yeah,
no
Notion is fantastic for this. You can create
Right.
these intricate setups and views.
Very cool. Yeah, this is very interesting. Is there anything else you would want to display here?
Basically, these are the tasks, and productivity is about having tasks in front of you and getting them done. And GTD, I'm also an advocate of GTD. I really like this idea. I do work better with this bullet style checkboxes, you know. So because like I mentioned, I might have a task that takes me 3 days or 2 weeks or something. Well, the more realistic way to work on it and healthy way would be to have subtasks, maybe, you know. But at the end of the day, do I really need to spend time on writing all these subtasks on the paper in Notion if I already know what I'm going to do?
Oh yeah, 100%. I agree.
Yes.
And I think a lot of people, they forget that as you evolve your knowledge, as you evolve your level of comfort with certain work, you won't need to clarify it in as much detail anymore if it's already ingrained in your brain almost what needs to be done, right? At that point, it becomes more time spent with no return on investment, basically.
You've done this so many times. I mean,
Yeah.
what am I going to write there? Like open website, open the control panel.
Right, exactly.
Seriously, that's a waste of time. That's a waste of time.
It is. I also made a video on that, addressing that issue specifically. And for me, it used to be the same with, for example, producing YouTube videos. When I started doing them 2 years ago, yeah, I needed to make sure I had a detailed checklist. But 50 videos onwards, I don't need that checklist anymore. Like, I'm good. I know what to do at this point. It's a lot simpler. So I understand what you're coming from here.
Maybe when you're working in a team or later down the line, you want to hire a person.
Sure.
To help you. And you have this document and you have the template for all that. Yes, you can pass it on. But right now,
yeah, I think what you've got on point here really is this rule. Like, you should adjust the complexity of your productivity apps and how you fill them with the level of complexity you can handle already in your brain, and not always go as detailed as possible. That's just a waste of time. So that does make sense.
I wanted to touch on this daily priority and context. So daily priority was mean like, do I do this quick first thing? Like, it's just very easy. It takes me 2 minutes, 3 minutes. I need to just make sure that the website is up and running or whatever. I just go and check and I check it off. Or the one thing would be that main task that I cannot not go to sleep. That's very harsh, but I cannot feel accomplished if I haven't done it.
Right.
This is like eat the frog thing. Right?
Yep.
And then, is it in the morning? Like, is it something that I need to do in the morning? I don't know. For example, I had a client in Australia, so I had to measure to check all the time. Like, is it in the morning, afternoon, or evening? And then context. So high energy, low energy. I think this pretty much self-explanatory. Is this going to take a lot of energy from me? Am I going to do it at home, at the office, out on my phone, or on my laptop? In my case, home and office are the same place because I work at home. But I need to understand that this is an office task and I need my setup. I need people to be out of the room or whatever.
Right.
So that's why these things are here. That's it in terms of tasks and how they are related. Other database is pretty brief. I'm going to touch on them. So like I mentioned in my submission, so I have these tasks and then I start completing them. I have a completed tasks bin. I'm not going to open it. It's just all the tasks that I've checked.
Sure.
And they are just gone. Whatever. Interactions. This interaction used to be a thing. Meeting notes. I used to meet with clients or have an email that I would need to reference later on. Anything that's an interaction of any form and type, you have to document it, especially for work. Then I have contacts, because for sometimes I'm working with a client that has a contact outside of their company. So I need to contact that person, but for that client, for that project, for that tasks, so everything is related. And then I have the resources. So basically, tool stack, what are the tools I use? Code snippets. I also do a bit of a web development, so I need to reference some code snippets that I Stack Overflow or whatever, you need to have them and not search them anymore. I have like 300 or so snippets there, and tutorials from YouTube, inspiration, and so on. I'm going to find an article or visit code snippet or whatnot, and I have this Notion Saver Chrome extension that I click, and I have these forms that I've pre-prepared for myself. Is this a WordPress plugin that I need to reference, or I find it interesting and whatnot? And what's it suitable for? What project is it suitable for? And I just reference it here. Once I click here, it goes into the Notion database for that project, and I have this tutorial or code snippet or theme or articles to read or inspirational tool or whatever already accessible.
Cool. This extension, is that the official Chrome web clipper, or is it a different custom-made Safe to Notion extension?
It's not the official one,
Right.
because the official one doesn't let me have these different forms.
Mm.
So basically, they are called forms. Add new form, you just literally give it access to your databases, and then, okay, what's this? Is it an article to read? Yes. Okay, so is it a bookmark, or do I extract all the content? And it comes with all the content that's on the page, on the article, and that's very useful for me, right?
Yep.
Then
Yep.
I have all this information. I can actually add new properties that I have in my database, and it's actually linked. So if I put here client, and for example, I save and I want to add this page, it shows up here. I set up that I need to input the client, it shows up here, and it knows already all my clients, and I can click and add them from there.
Very cool.
Extremely valuable. It used to not have a sync function. So for example, if I would have to reinstall my browser or my laptop or move to a different computer, I would have to make this again and again. But they introduced it, and I'm very happy about it. Extremely useful for anybody, for any kind of information. I'm starting to dabble with this also in Obsidian, but it's just for note-taking. I really like the fact that, for example, I can input all my Kindle highlights in Obsidian. I've only started using maybe a couple of months ago, after so many months of these YouTube videos. Should I use it or should I not use it? And for me, what doesn't make sense here in Obsidian and didn't make sense is the level of complexity and architectural structure that you need to build yourself. And it's not as easy as in Notion. In Notion, you have all these tables that you can assign, and relations and functions and whatnot. Arguably, you can do this in Obsidian as well. But for those that know what Obsidian is, it has so-called core plugins and community plugins. So core plugins is basically plugins that Obsidian themselves have built. Community plugins, on the other hand, is what makes Obsidian extremely valuable for architect type person like me and you, because you can have different plugins that would help you do certain things. You can have a button that lets you have a quick action, add a new task, for example, in your GTD, or you name it. And there are so many here, so many that I just basically spend hours and hours searching for them. So that's the problem. Again, rabbit hole, rabbit hole, rabbit hole.
Yeah, it's a common issue for productivity enthusiasts. Actually, another individual I spoke to just yesterday, who also shared his setup, expressed the exact same concern that people like us, we are highly dedicated to improving our productivity, but in that effort, we sometimes lose ourselves. We spend, like you've said, hours and hours tweaking and optimizing because we feel like it can always become a bit better. And that's true, probably.
It does.
But yeah, and it does.
At what
but
cost? Yeah.
Exactly. You should definitely moderate the efforts and try and continuously evaluate, are still doing the things that are most important, or are you improving something with diminishing returns, right? And that's why I am always careful with tweaking my system, even though that's my job at this point, also helping people optimize their system. But I advocate for keep it simple. A good system that you don't have to tweak for hours on end is always going to be better than a fantastic system that costs you so much time and effort to build. You didn't get as far ahead as you could have with that good system. So I definitely understand the pain point there. But it's also fun, I suppose.
Extremely fun.
So maybe you can actually time block playing with your system a little bit, but stick to that limited time only. And I can see already that in Obsidian, there's so much you can tweak. I haven't used it myself before. I have looked at it quickly, And from what I am able to tell is, like you've said, you can kind of link your thinking in a very visual way. You have these nodes that can link and create a kind of visual. Yeah, there it is.
Nothing is linked to the level of any Obsidian enthusiast. Somebody that's using Obsidian would now have a stroke. But sorry for that. I'm just a newbie. And I'm probably not using Obsidian for linking too much as I'm using it for note taking in a different way.
I see.
Yeah. So I like this inbox. I have this inbox here that just whatever new article I find online, I have a Chrome extension that brings the things into Obsidian with a markdown language. So for example, I have this article that I recently brought into Obsidian. I have the title, I have when it was created, what's the source, I can go back to that link. The journal part is very interesting for me because I've never done journaling, and I found it very useful recently. I like to take notes on a daily and an hourly basis. If some idea pops into my mind, I need to dump it somewhere. So the way I do it, I add it in these daily notes, as Obsidian calls it. And for example, this is a note that I just quickly took from the iPhone. And I have this shortcut on iPhone that I click a button and it shows up a box there, and I type my note that I had while walking outside, and it timestamps it. That was taken at 9:37 this morning, and that's it. I can go on with my life, and that's on the phone and synchronizes in my computer. And so I've mentioned meeting notes in Notion have moved away. Now they are in Obsidian for one particular reason. It's super fast. I would go to a client to have a meeting to talk about it. I would literally just have Obsidian already open, because you might have a Notion open, but by the time you have to use it, it's somewhat cached or something, you need to refresh it. You lose 15 seconds. 10 seconds. Notion is extremely slow. So for me, it's very useful that I have it here, and I can just quickly right-click, start a new note, and that's it. I have a template. Those that use Obsidian know the beauty of templates. And there is a plugin called Templater, which basically takes whatever template you create, and you can assign that particular template to a particular folder. So I have this meeting notes that's using the template of the meeting note here.
So basically, any new item you create inside of that folder will automatically have that template applied.
Beautiful, isn't it?
It is. It is. It's very unique. Wow.
Yeah, so I think some might find different uses for these templates, but for me, this works brilliantly.
Yeah.
Then I have Raindrop bookmarks. This is just another platform that collects bookmarks online, and you can highlight what you from there. And with the click of a button here on the left, I can click a button and synchronizes everything.
Wow. This is very interesting. The main thing I am still curious about is you have these different folders, and some of them are self-explanatory, like the journal, for example, right? That is a single purpose it serves. It's self-evident. Whereas others, like these raindrop bookmarks, for example, or perhaps these readwise snippets, you save them. And it's good that they're there, but you save them for a reason, I can imagine, right? Because they have something of substance that is relevant to a certain area of your life, whatever that may be, web design, something else, your hobbies, your family, whatever it is. How can you, instead of looking at it from the angle of the medium you used to save the info, as we're doing now, instead look at it from the angle of the domain it's related to, your area of focus in your life?
Perfect. That's a valid question, and I don't remember who said this. That you should form a habit of saving notes of any kind based on where you're going to use them, not where you source them from. And what I've done here with Readwise and tweets and whatnot, what you mentioned, that's counterintuitive. But this would be counterintuitive in a platform or app that doesn't do this internal linking as good as Obsidian does, or Rome Research, or any other similar platform. So basically, I have them here just because I can automate so that they appear here.
Right.
So that I don't have to bring them over, But then, as I go through, I see, oh, this is something that I highlighted from this tweet. But then I can either a hashtag, a tag, or I can link it. For example, this is relevant to WordPress, for example, and I can link it to that note. And that's the beauty of it. I can just do these reviews at the end of the week. I can go through everything I've said in the previous 7 days, and I can process. I block time on my calendar. Let me show you. Weekly review. Start review. When you press this button, it would open all the notes that you've taken in the last 7 days. Okay.
Cool. Yeah.
So I'm going here and I know that, for example, this one is related to this project. That's it. And then when I go on that, I will find the link to this and so on. And I can close it and move to all the different notes that I've taken and whatnot. Assign different information, different tags, different projects, link to other nodes and so on.
So through those tags, essentially, you're able to link all these different materials that are sourced in different areas to a topic. And perhaps in the graph, you can select a topic,
Yeah.
expand it, and see
Yeah.
what knowledge have I acquired
Yes.
and bundle together related to WordPress themes, or as we can see
Yeah.
here. Right, I see. Okay.
But with one clarification, it's not the tags that are doing
Mhm.
this, it's the actual internal linking.
Okay. Yeah.
So for example, here I have this meeting note that I can have with you, and I know for a fact that I probably would want to reference what I wrote here in
Right.
this note,
Right.
because
Mhm.
this I've saved what I've sent you in my submission so that I remember to talk about it in my call with you. So then this is linked, and if I would find it here at some point somewhere and I click it, it would have a link like this,
Right. I
a
see.
node or whatever. Yeah.
Yep. Do you use Obsidian also for actionable information, or is it mostly this non-actionable information, this reference materials?
So when I'm doing the meeting notes,
Right.
I'm talking with a client and there are some tasks that I need to do. I write
And
them
so,
here.
and what happens after that? Do you move them into
Yeah.
Notion?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
That's a bit of a hassle, but I find it that it's faster to do it this way than have Notion and add those
sure.
tasks when they are talking about it. But on the same topic, I might have the case for it where I have a meeting with a client. Let's say I have this meeting with this client, which is myself, and I go here and I put the tasks already here. I can do that, but I don't want to have to deal with all the, how do you call them,
All these
the
interfaces.
properties.
Yeah,
I
sure.
don't need to deal with this.
Yeah, you're just trying to capture
Yep.
during the meeting
Yep.
what are the action items, and you can clarify them, and you have a intuitive way that works for you. So no, that's fine. I just wanted to understand.
And sometimes these action items don't all relate to myself. Maybe the client has to do something.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Okay.
So by the end of the meeting or something, I go home, I tweak a little bit what's happening here, and then I send an email with everything that we've discussed so that the client also has this information. I fell in love with this app after, like I said, 5, 6, maybe even 7 years of Todoist.
Mm.
And the reason I've moved to TickTick is for this particular thing right here, the calendar view.
Yep.
But then again, I used to have this extremely useful and use it extensively when I would have all my work-related tasks inside TickTick. Because then, as I said, I could have all these tasks that don't have a due date, and I would just drag them and assign them there, right?
Mm.
That's very powerful. One thing that I've struggled with always is having different Google calendars, for example, in the same app, in the same platform.
Mm-hmm.
Up until recently, to my shameless experience, I've done this in TickTick. Recently, there is a new app called Routine. It's quite unbelievable what you can do with it. And to my case, for what I would use it is exactly this, having all the calendar events see there. And I can, because I cannot create a calendar event here in TickTick, sync to my Google Calendar, but I can do that in Routine.
It is actually possible to create a task and it will show up on the Google Calendar.
But then again, for my case, most of my calendar events are related to having a call with somebody. And I cannot have a Zoom link or a Google Meet link if I do that. Automatically generated.
Yeah.
But the Routine does that, for example.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
So that's, like I said in the beginning of the call, there's so many tools that you need to bring together, and that's a little bit frustrating, but beautiful.
Yeah, as long as it continues to work, and as long as any connections you may have in between them, especially, don't break. And that is why I am personally always a bit hesitant with adding a tool to my tool stack. At this point, I use TickTick and Google Calendar and Google Workspace for documents, etc.
Yeah, sure.
And that's it. I know that it's not the perfect system, probably. I can tell from what I've seen in Obsidian here that I could definitely improve my note taking. That is one of my goals actually for
Yeah.
next year. But
Yeah.
I have found that connecting or trying to connect too many tools together, you are also increasing the risk. And it's about what level of risk you're comfortable with, of course. For me, that tolerance is pretty low, but it sounds like for you, you do enjoy having multiple tools and having them work together in a certain way.
Work, routine, and personal. These are the only three lists I'm using in TickTick on a daily basis. Personal is something that I do for myself, and then nobody cares about it. It's nobody else's business, right? Then I have routines. Do I need to do something on a daily, weekly, monthly basis? I add it up here. I need to have this outreach. I need to call my brothers. I need to keep in contact with them. I need to pay rent every month. I need to trim beard every 2 or 3 weeks, because honestly, I will not do it. A little bit lazy. Everything that has a repeating aspect to it. And then I have work, and this is the only thing that exists here for the sole purpose of connecting it to Notion through Zapier. So I mentioned I really like shortcuts and I really like automation. So I would actually be, I don't know, be in Obsidian or work on something, and an idea comes into my mind, oh, I need to do this for that client. I would just simply have this shortcut that I assigned for myself. I would bring pop-up on the middle of the screen.
Yep.
And I can say new task goes here for tomorrow, but it has to be assigned to this project, to this list.
Yep.
I click enter and I'm out of here, and I can continue doing what I was doing. It literally took me 3 seconds.
Yep.
Very important when you're trying to be focused on something, when you have a Pomodoro session or whatever, you need to have this.
Yeah, I love the quick
Out of
capture option.
At some point, Zapier will query it, because it's an automation that says create a Notion item from new TickTick tasks. So really quickly, whenever I create a task in TickTick with that list, it just goes and fills the information in. It creates a database item in my tasks database. It's pretty self-explanatory.
So TickTick offers you the quick capture functionality. And then through Zapier, you're able to effectively quickly capture into Notion, since Notion itself doesn't have this same in-desktop shortcut that you can use to add an add. So this is kind of a hack to, like you've said, stay focused. I think that's very creative. That's very cool.
Yeah. Even if Notion would have a shortcut for it, it would be so slow anyway. So.
Yeah, I'm hearing you. And I feel like this is one of your key frustrations. This speed issue it sounds like something very significant, and I can only imagine. Are you looking to move away from Notion due to its speed issues? Do you have an alternative in mind, or what are you looking to do to address the speed issue?
I'm not going to move away from Notion, as it appears, because it gives me this level of complexity in terms of the context of the tasks and projects and everything, and invoicing and whatever, that I cannot really replicate in any other platform as of now. You might argue there might be some project management platforms out there, but my use case is so different than any others that I just don't want to go and set up everything there. And the other reason that I would not move away from Notion is what Thomas Frank said. It's going to be a pain
to migrate.
There is no way. You're going to have to do it manually.
Yeah, if you have this level of custom taxonomies and how they're interrelated, I would agree. At the same time, it does pose kind of a risk, doesn't it? Where you have this kind of buy-in with Notion at this point, where you feel like you have to take these very intrusive drawbacks for granted almost, because you feel like you cannot migrate away.
I don't know what I'm going to do. I trust that Notion will be a player in this game for at least enough time for me to still be in this. Imagine myself doing this for the rest of my life, honestly.
Okay.
But that's it. I don't know.
I do see a lot of the advantages as well. It sounds like if Notion had TickTick speed, or alternatively, if TickTick and all its functionality supported custom taxonomies like Notion does, and you could perhaps have 2 separate TickTick accounts to easily switch between a kind of work view and a personal view, so you can easily switch off, that could perhaps be an ideal solution. You have these custom workflows, you have these custom taxonomies, they serve their purpose very powerfully. So I think there's a lot of good about this system. Obsidian, it looks super intriguing what you've built with Obsidian. How can we address the speed issue in particular? How can we perhaps do it within Notion? Or perhaps there are some alternatives to Notion that perhaps offer a somewhat pain-free migrating experience. I don't believe it will be an easy experience, whichever tool you use. Like you said, there will be manual work involved, but in the end, if it's gives you a serious improvement over what you have now?
I'm struggling prioritizing. I need to have a time blocking, and I need to find a system that works and that really holds me accountable, because otherwise
Yeah.
I'm not going to do it. This is something that you could help with in terms of what kind of view would you suggest? What kind of information would you suggest that I look at in terms of this metadata? And how would I prioritize and not force myself, but keep myself accountable at least?
First of all, Ionut, thanks again for sharing your setup. I think it's super interesting to see how a tool like Notion can support you in performing tasks that require more than just a couple of simple tags, that have more taxonomies to them due to the complexity of your work. And it got me thinking about how other professionals with specialized jobs may run into limitations with standard to-do applications like Microsoft To Do, or even more advanced ones like Todoist or TickTick. If I'm a meteorologist, for example, my to-dos are probably a lot more complex than what you can just check off like that. They probably also have unique custom dashboards with intricate reports on all kinds of climate and weather data. And the same is true for you as a web designer. You've developed a couple of unique taxonomies that are relevant to your work. At the same time, it's pretty clear that Notion's speed is bothering you, and understandably so. If it's your main daily driver for work, you don't want to keep on waiting for things to load, especially not on mobile, anywhere really. And we discussed how migrating away from Notion is a hassle, but I still do think that is the best long-term play, since your Notion setup is only going to grow. It's only going to contain more data unless you do a significant purge, of course. But even that is no guarantee that Notion's speed is going to increase, since you're not the only one who's experienced these speed issues. You need to find something that is as customizable as Notion to create these taxonomies, but it has to be faster. In addition, you want to have a clear separation between your personal and work-related tasks, these different focus areas, so to speak. And lastly, you're looking for a better way to time block and prioritize. That is why I would like to invite you to ditch both Notion as well as TickTick and try ClickUp instead, which is a tool that has a bold promise, which is one app to replace all apps. And that is usually a major red flag to me. However, ClickUp really does get a lot of things right. In my experience, it's not been slow. You can easily design different workspaces to accommodate your role as a web designer, but also more personal tasks, and switch in between them. And while its note-taking capabilities don't really come close to Obsidian, I also don't think you have to get rid of Obsidian, it still gets a lot of things right. Custom dashboards and views for tasks to view them from different perspectives, preloading sequential projects so you can save time managing projects and actually work on them, whilst the tool feeds you new to-dos after completing blockers, and dependencies just show up like that, and it allows you to collaborate with your clients just like Notion does. Now, as you've observed already, migrating away from Notion is going to suck. There's no way around it. You've got a lot of data and custom dashboards in there that you will need to recreate. So that is a pain that you have to figure out for yourself. Is that worth the investment for long-term productivity? I would argue it is worth the investment, since you don't want to keep on frustrating yourself with a tool that is so essential to your work. But in the end, it's your call to make. For time blocking, I honestly always recommend keeping it simple. I know that there are many special apps for time blocking, like Sunsama, to just name an example, but I found that grouping my tasks by context and then scheduling blocks of time based on those contexts works just fine. And after a focused work session is complete, I can just navigate to the context list, check off whatever I did, and then move on perhaps to another block of focus time within that context, or another one. Either way, you can define them in ClickUp easily, then pull up a dashboard that shows them so that you can proceed into a deep work state with ClickUp, or whichever tool you choose really in the end, feeding you the tasks you can do now based on the context you've chosen, which could be a specific programming language, a specific design tool, or anything else that is relevant to your situation. That is my advice, but I am sure all of you watching will have some advice for Ionut as well, especially if you're operating in a similar space as a web designer, a web developer, for example, and it would be super valuable to hear from you. How are you running your system? What suggestions do you have for Ionut based on his priorities, based on his current setup? What would you change? What is your feedback? Leave it in the comments. This video doesn't end after the runtime has elapsed. It continues on in the comments section, and I hope we'll be able to create a conversation in there that is going to not just help Ionut, but help everybody who is watching and perhaps has a similar situation, a similar job, a similar challenge with their productivity setup. We're all here to learn and support each other. So let's get the conversation going in the comments. Thanks for watching. And if you want to participate in one of these videos and show your setup, use the form linked in the description to apply.